to get back at it. And Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, but the science behind climate change with the penguin, I guess, if you guys can see that should be the one that everybody looks at from their climate.
Right, that is correct.
Okay.
And I'm gonna show that when we do this, and then there'll be time when everyone will be able to participate in getting the wedges down to the proper level in a modified version of what was previously done. So we'll talk about that. But yeah, get that out for sure.
All right. So if everybody looks in their educator kits and they find the penguin that's looking at a plant growing, strangely, it looks like in the middle of the Antarctic, that'd be perfect.
That's right.
And if you're in a position, Arlie, thank you. If you're in a position to turn your video on, we'd love to see your face. Like I said, we are a small group. It'll kind of make it more interactive for all of us as we go through and engage in this last piece. But you know, hey, y'all all adults, you all been teachers. Quite frankly, you've been teaching that online stuff probably for the past year and a half. And so you understand the vibe that we're putting out there and what the educator to educator ask is. So if you're in a position, turn it on. Well, I know that a lot of you maybe have different unique circumstances, but let's check out this third game.
Okay. Well, welcome back from the break. And we are going to, we are going to go into something that actually will take a little bit of what we've talked about already, but modify it into another form. And let me go ahead and share the screen to get this started to our climate wedges. So we're going to talk about the science. We've already sort of discussed the science behind climate change already. But Dr. Foster did a great job of noting that, as we all know about, we have the natural greenhouse effect and the human-induced greenhouse effect. And the deal there is that carbon dioxide is generally considered to be the benchmark gas, if you will, that will tell us something about what the climate is really going to be like. Water vapor is there, and actually it's also more effective at absorbing energy from the earth, but we can't control that very well because we have 70% of the world's surface is ocean, so we really can't control the water vapor part of it. But we can control somewhat the carbon dioxide part. Now, if you'll recall what Dr. Foster said on Tuesday, he had a graph similar to this, where you note where the carbon emissions of fossil fuels and taking into account the temperature change, we have carbon emissions of fossil fuels, carbon emissions from land use together constitute the carbon dioxide concentrations. And you'll notice it's ramped up quite a bit since the Industrial Revolution, and temperatures have spiked accordingly. So what do we do about that, right? Again, global warming, dare we say it. Some of the models suggest that by the time the year 2100 rolls around, this is the planet that we'll see with much warmer than normal conditions in the red, and blue in the are colder than normal conditions. Part of the reason why we have a slightly cooler than normal condition in Greenland is that the ice is going to melt, and that'll cool the water off there over the North Atlantic. The same is true down here with Antarctica. So we have those places that are cooling, but the rest of it is warming up. Some more than others. Obviously, Tennessee and Kentucky, as we mentioned before, isn't warming up as much as other parts of the country. But still, what we're trying to deal with is how we're going to mitigate that and not make this map a prophecy of some sort. So in 2004, Princeton University came up with this idea of carbon stabilization. And they noted that the trend in carbon was at a current path that by the year 2050, at least back in 2004, and it may be the case still, that we would get up to doubling the carbon dioxide levels that we currently see. Right now, we're at 415 parts per million or so, give or take a few parts per million. but by then we'll be up to 800 some odd parts per million. And so the question then becomes, how do we mitigate that? First of all, we notice that there's the intake of carbon naturally. We get up 8 billion tons of carbon go in, and remember, each 2 billion tons equals 1 part per million. So 2 billion go in. 800 parts per million of carbon is what we've got now, and 2 of it goes into the oceans. Again, I remind you that that part is actually we're fast approaching the point where we can't really take that in anymore, but it's still being taken in. And 2 parts come from the land biosphere, and then that means 4 billions is sort of extracted out. So if everything were normal, we'd see that 4 billion go in, 8 billion goes in, 4 billions go out, and 4 billion is added every year. Okay. So during the glacial period, for instance, we had 400 parts per million. 150 parts per million. And then doubling. Today we're about 380. Actually, about 400 parts per million. And doubling it would be around 800 parts per million. So we're trying to modify that, right? So how do we do that? Well, the guys at Princeton said, let's call this this path here that's in the yellow, the path that we want to get to where we can avoid the doubling of CO2. So we take that stabilization triangle, the difference between the doubling and what we want, and see if we can break it up into stages, into wedges, because we can't do it all at once. But if we do it sector by sector by sector, we're good to go. So they divided it up into 8 sectors, or 8 wedges, if you will, that can be attacked by different parts of the economy. So what they did then was say, okay, we have 4 areas that we can look at that we can save carbon with, right? And in those 4 areas, there are other parts to that, like in efficiency and conservation. We can use increased transport efficiency, reduce miles traveled, increase building efficiency, and so forth. In the case of renewables and biostorage, wind generation, solar electricity, wind-generated hydrogen fuel, biofuels, forest storage, and soil storage, and on we can go. Well, what Dr. Tawari and I came up with was a modified version of this. And what we said was, it turns out that agriculture isn't quite as much as 1/8 of the amount we need to take out, but we'll just assume that it's 1/8 of the amount to take out. So what we're going to do is work on our 1/8, our one wedge, as it were, okay? And so there are sectors of agriculture that you want to work with to see if you can modify that, right? So here's what we did. We have sectors that are available to agriculture: livestock, crop production, food processing, transportation, ag, industrial inputs, and alternate energy resource adoption, okay? So the strategies are within each sector, are listed within each sector, which we'll show you in a second, that can be adopted to account for our one wedge. Now we're going to split our one wedge into 8 distinct parts, or 8 wedges as well. So we're playing the wedge game, but we're only playing it with one wedge, and we're going to divide that one wedge into 8 wedges, if you know what I mean. So we're going to at least take care of, go back to here, one of these wedges. And we'll call this wedge, let's say, the agriculture wedge, okay? And then we're going to divide that wedge up into 8 parts, okay? So Dr. Tawari is a little bit more adept at the agricultural side of this than I am. So Dr. Rushing, do you want to go ahead and start talking about these wedges that we can use as strategies to divide up in 8 parts that wedge we have to account for?
Mark, thank you. Yeah, so like Mark said, we just kind of played a little, twist to what the original game was, and we thought since we were, and most of our experience with this game so far has been with the FFA kids that come on campus, for 4-H or FFA events and things like that. So we have mostly had some, good fun events with some kids that we have played this game with earlier. And really we thought of, like modifying it as much as possible to, reflect agriculture and its different sectors, subsectors within agriculture that may be able to, and some strategies that may be able to reduce the overall emissions from agriculture. For example, livestock, we came up with, farm and ranch operations, feedlot operations, food and nutrition, going all the way from farm to table. And then, in crop production, we had things like soil conservation, tillage practices, we had crop varieties, we had rotation management, crop rotation. Recently cover crops, all of that would probably come into this. Land use changes, so that would be another item. And then food processing, we had things like, reducing water use. Some of you probably heard about Donna's talk earlier today. So not only that area, a big production area for cotton, it's also it's probably one of the largest beef production areas in the world. So tremendous amount of water is being lost in all of that operation. So some of those strategies. Automation with transport and all of that, or food safety, quality measures, all of those could also be included in that. And reducing perishability, so enhancing shelf life and some other strategies. With transportation, we had things like transportation centers, so all these big retailers that have these transportation centers, basically the distribution centers. For example, as simple as Walmart, one of the most efficient distribution centers for food retail, how they have that hub and the wheel and spoke model where they have a distribution center that caters to the different retail markets. So those kinds of things for transportation, local and direct marketing. So this was one of the things where we thought was a great way to include local food production with net savings. So really don't spend too much money in investing on it. It's actually something about what Carson was talking about earlier in the panel today. That was a great way, CSAs, local marketing, farmers markets, things like that. So that's another, in one way, it's kind of a net saving strategy. Agriculture industry inputs. So we can't forget, reducing fertilizer use, fertilizer, chemical, pesticide research, betterment of those ideas, how that can reduce carbon emissions. And then switching to natural inputs, so things like organic farming, using, locally produced manure and things like that. A lot of the other developing countries have been doing that for a long time. And then a lot of the, areas in our food production systems are also following that. So that was another item. And then alternate energy resource adoption. So with the big push on alternative energy, especially the last couple of years, the big push on solar energy, wind energy, those kinds of things, developing plant species for biofuels. We were talking about canola yesterday, the great crop for biofuel production, biodiesel, sunflowers, all these different strategies. And then the use of nuclear energy, which obviously, brings a lot more savings in terms of expenditure in terms of how it's implemented, but also reduces carbon emissions. So these are the combination strategies and came up with, and I'm sure we could add to this list, but just for the purpose of this game. And here's where you can innovate. You can modify this. You can come up with like a lot more combinations. And this is just what we came up with for simplicity purposes, but you can always modify it. And we'll play it with this, what we have right now. So your task is, Mark, if you could go to the previous slide,
Okay.
Please.
Yes.
Yeah, so your task is to select the most optimal combination of strategies. And I think we talked about 8 wedges, right, Mark?
Right.
Yeah. So the task really is to select the most optimal combination of 8 strategies that you can pick from all of those areas. And the idea really is to take as much as possible from individual sectors that were listed there. So it's not like just one sector bearing the load for reducing carbon emissions. So like the balance is what the students would think about, and that'll help reduce the amount of carbon put in our atmosphere for the lowest expenditure it takes to implement the strategy. So really we are looking at the lowest cost, the highest cost benefits to cost ratio. So we are looking for more T's, which is tons of carbon, which is denoted by the T's that are mentioned with each strategy, and the dollar amounts, which is the amount of money it takes to implement the strategy. So as a team, in the next few minutes, we'll work on calculating the highest T to dollar ratio, and the one with the highest ratio would win the team.
So what we want to do now is turn it over to you all to see if you can develop a strategy for yourself as to what sort of combination of sectors of agriculture, and just sort of put it with the wedge, as it were. I think the game board that y'all got has that, right? The blank one, is that correct? Okay, so sort of color a wedge, as it were, if you want, based on this, and try to figure out the best, as Dr. Tawari said, the best ton to dollar ratio in terms of saving carbon and saving dollars at the same time. So we're going to leave it for you all to sort of hash that out, at least right now. Normally get into groups of teams to do this, but you can do it individually right now if you want. And we'll see what sort of results we can come up with.
And also, most of the times when we do a game like this with students, we'll give them a little bit more time for reflection after they are done with the game, just so that they come up with a little bit more. Generally we do it on like those big, sticky poster boards, and then they'll like draw it out and then just talk about it as a team, why they thought a particular combination was best. What did they learn out of it? And so that kind of discussion kind of just wraps up the game towards the end.
Right. So we want to allow more time in this session to be able for you all to complete that and share with the rest of the group here what you all came up with. And don't be shy.
So Carson, at this time, are we going into teams for this game?
So we have the choice right now. We can split up into little breakout rooms for people to discuss options as a little team to do this, or we can have people work individually. I don't want to speak on behalf of the group. It might be kind of fun to put people into breakout rooms and have people work together as a team to decide on their complementary wedges there. So yeah, if everybody's interested in that, we can, I'll open up some breakout rooms here in just a couple seconds. So while I'm doing that,
I opened them, Carson. I think we're going to have a good 3 teams here is how it's going to work out.
okay.
As I look at it. Is that okay?
Yep, we can go ahead and send people into those now.
How much time do we want in the team session?
I'll defer that to Dr. Simpson and Dr. Tawari. You guys think about 10 minutes, maybe?
Rachna, what do you think?
Because we have been doing this on a very ultra fast basis. Typically we do it like, in 20 minutes, we already are done with explaining and everything, because we don't want to give them like too much time thinking about it, just kind of really brainstorming real quick and come up with a solution. So maybe 5 to 7 minutes. I think something on.
Maybe. Yeah.
All right, so to help mitigate for the afternoon blaze, some of y'all must have ate heavy lunches. I'm going to give you 8 minutes. So you're going to have 8 minutes to get in there and rock it out. And then you can come back to the room and tell us how it's going, if that sounds good. So hopefully in your teams, and it's random. It is random as all get out. Y'all going to get in there and someone's going to say, oh yeah, I got the handout, and y'all can work through it. Before I hit go, because it's going to suck you into the Zoom vortex, does anybody have questions about the expectations about what you're about to do? Don't go into that breakout room not knowing what you're supposed to be doing.
I do.
Trevor. Good.
Yeah, I just don't know how to fill out the sheet. I get the thing about the wedges. I'm looking at the sectors of agriculture and strategies. And then the game board is what you probably can't even see that.
Right, that's those virtual backgrounds. That beautiful seeing those hills of Tennessee, but
yeah,
is that the Blue Mountain, Smoky Blue Mountains or something like that?
It's the Smoky Mountains, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, typically what we used to do is we used to give them like these big poster boards, and they would just sketch it out. You could do the same thing, like on a blank sheet behind that. You could just sketch out a wedge and just put in strategies in there, which kind of fills it in the shape of a wedge, if that makes it easier. Basically, we're trying to create a wedge with those 8 strategies inbuilt in that. So you could just sketch it out with a pen or something similar.
Now, one more question. Is this something where I can take little pieces of each sector and put them together?
Yeah.
Like maybe some combination and make
Right.
my own out of that. Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly. And that's why we had that color coded. So when they work it as a class, they just have it fun playing with colors, or, just like, so it's not just one single color. So we can innovate in that game.
Awesome.
Great question, Trevor. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
your help. Anybody else? Everybody feeling good? Uh-oh. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I had to do a little bit of countdown, right? Okay. I don't see any hands. I don't even see anybody panicking. I didn't see anybody exit the room. Open all rooms. Oh, Christina. Dude, I am so worried about, I should probably pause the recording. I'm gonna pause the recording. I know how tough it is, and it might just be, I might, right? It's not like we're recording, you're gonna come check on you, oh, did they do it? I just need you to share where you're seeing some of the connections and opportunity of using those tools. So does anybody mind raising their hand so we don't talk over each other and sharing like, hey, that one this morning or this one, this is how I could use it. So those 3 games we worked through, does anybody have an integration idea that you might pitch to us? Awesome, Jessica, rock it out with us.
And you may or may not hear songs and toys in the background.
Remember,
So
that just
I
adds
actually have
flavor.
2.
We love that. That's flavor.
So I actually have 2. I love this one because this gives my students more of a real world example,
Right.
and it touches on multiple different industries, not just animal production. We can also look at like truck transportation. A lot of my boys have big loud trucks, so we can talk about what their how their trucks are contributing to that. But then I also liked the website that we went to where we could see the world and it was changing the colors and we could see the heat on the surface. It was really cool to see. It was very eye-opening to see what parts of the earth actually made the difference. So the water and the clouds really brought the temperature down compared to not having those things. And for my students, it's always, they have to see it to believe it. And if you just talk about it, it's like, yeah, whatever. But whenever they actually see it, they're like, oh, you were telling the truth. Okay, all right, cool.
Great.
Jessica, I appreciate you sharing that. Mark, you had something there?
No, that's great. It's great to be here.
Awesome, good stuff. Jack, am I saying that right? Awesome. She gave me the head now. I was a little bit nervous. I'm like, I'm gonna go through it. Jack's short for Jacqueline, I bet maybe.
It is, yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, it is. I am going to agree with Jessica. This one honestly might be my favorite. I teach alternative energy and sustainability to at an urban high school. So being able to like give them a picture that doesn't necessarily focus on the traditional ag is awesome. And to be like, hey, this is all stuff we've talked about. I can tie it together with all my classes. Like, no, that one's probably my favorite.
That's cool. I like that. And Jack, I'm curious, where's the school you teach at?
I teach at Whites Creek in the Metro Nashville School District.
All right.
Where Dr. Gibson is the reason our amazing program exists.
There you go.
Yes, he actually came to visit me whenever I was at the University of Florida. And they told us about, they should get a demonstration with the students about the alternative energy sources. Yes.
He drove, they
went across the country.
Biodiesel, and they made the biodiesel in the labs that we have at school, and they drove from Whites Creek, Tennessee to Canada, and then took a second group of students and drove from Whites Creek, Tennessee to Florida, all on the biodiesel that the students created themselves.
That's
Right,
Dr.
and
Ricketts, right? Isn't that Dr. Cliff Ricketts?
No, that's Dr. Gibson.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
The presentation was
I know
amazing.
Dr. Gibson too. He helps us with all of our dual credit and dual enrollment stuff.
All right, good stuff. Thank y'all for sharing. Trevor, bring it to us. Uh-oh, there you go.
Well, I'm still wrapping my head around how I would apply this to biology, but I taught horticulture for a while and taught greenhouse management. And one of the things I loved about that class was like having the students think about what their business would look like and getting the product out to their customers. And it's like, you're going to locate your greenhouse in a specific space, but like, is it a place that it would be hard to move weight up to and away from, and how close is it to the interstate? And it sort of seemed to me like reducing the carbon footprint of your business would also save you money too, because there'd be like less money on transportation costs and things
Sure.
like that.
Well, I'm fascinated, and I hope, like, I love learning. That's why I get to work with other social scientists like the ag economists and ag business as we talk about the carbon market, and we start beginning to see people invest in that. And I wonder about some of our producers having that as a secondary income source of basically carbon retention. That's a whole nother conversation, not to take us down the lane, but I agree that there are financial implications and motivations that might be leveraged.
And I mean,
Ratchet,
I was just going to say,
Trevor.
that's what it's indicating in the agriculture transportation sector of the worksheet that we were just talking about,
Sure.
is that there would be some sort of T increase and money decrease. And so like, it's good to see it play out like just kind of ask students when I'm doing business, because I am also a work-based learning advisor.
Sure.
And so like, I have an advisory of kids, and that's why my high school is kind of weird, because I'm a biology teacher, but I'm also kind of like a work-based learning advisor. And it's just kind of cool to be like, hey, could we see how we could also incorporate climate change, or like lowering the carbon footprint into some of your projects if you just wanted to.
I think it's fun for us all to think how we can take current issues ripped from the news that impact the agricultural area in some way, shape, or form, and use them to teach academic skills to students in these different environments, right? That's the fun part about it. We're using a context that makes it relevant to them, where they feel like they're engaging in the world. So that's fun. Rachna, what do you got for us?
No, I was just really fascinated with all the wonderful ideas everybody was sharing. And like I was saying, you can always innovate around this game. You know, this is just what Mark and I came up with just to make it simple, but you can always innovate around it. And I think I was just going to share a nice picture from one of our student sessions. I just thought it was a cool picture. The student just seems really motivated. I'll just share that so you all can get an idea what I was talking about with those poster boards or poster sticky notes or whatever they are called. This guy right here. And I don't know if some of you might already know that, because I know there's some West Tennessee teachers. This was a 4-H camp in Montgomery Bell State Park we did a couple of years ago. And it was a very motivated group, some really good students. And they were like really on top of their game. I can see a lot of like them did like histograms. They even like, you know, played different ways of just explaining it. So I thought it was very motivating for us.
I can tell you, I've never met an administrator yet that wouldn't get fired up if they walked in and on an observation or a walkthrough and saw kids interpreting data, creating graphs, and working through basically the scientific process of how you present data. Like, they love that. And so the idea of how do you manifest data and interpret it, there's some critical thinking skills that we can all get excited about as we look at that.